Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Thinking Out Loud. Today, I would like to introduce Dale Lane, but before I jump into that, I would love to explain the purpose of thinking out loud itself, right? So I started. This is the second episode of Thinking Out Loud, and I started it with the purpose of getting the community together to work on SNKPI challenges. So, for instance, we're now discussing the publish and subscribe meanings on SNKPI, which are causing a lot of confusion. And I have to admit myself as well, to myself. So I'm inviting members of our community, like I invited Lorna, and today I'm inviting Daylane to speak about and to come up with potential creative solutions, or at least to leave some clues to the community and to the audience on how we could be solving that. Right. So, as I was saying, I don't want to spend more time explaining this. Today, I'm happy to introduce and, and to have Dale Lane, developer at IBM, speaking with me and discussing these things with me. So, hey Dale,
Hey,
welcome.
thank you.
So Dale, as I was saying, is works as a developer at IBM, and he's the author of Machine Learning for Kids. And I think you can tell us a little bit more about that, right?
Yeah, sure. Machine learning for kids is trying to raise awareness amongst children about what AI and machine learning is all about, how it impacts their lives, starting to open their eyes up to how AI isn't this future thing, but it's actually here now, and it's already, we all interact with these systems every day. And it gets them to learn about this stuff through hands-on projects. So they train their own machine learning models and they build things with them. And it's all integrated with platforms that students are used to. So things like Scratch. So they get this sort of visual drag and drop way of building machine learning powered AI projects. And by doing it, they get to sort of understand, get a bit of an insight into what this technology is and how it affects us.
Awesome. That sounds exciting. Before we joined live, I was telling Dale that I might be interested in what he's doing with machine learning for kids now that I have a baby. So I'm for sure will ping you in the future once the baby can actually do something other than crying and eating, right? But yeah, sounds exciting, and as I agree, uh, like artificial intelligence is not something of the future. Is happening right now. It can be improved by a lot yet, of course, but machine learning has been around for a while, and it's getting even better and better, and I think this is gonna make a difference in the future, and even nowadays. By the way, the other day, now it uh, you reminded me with this. The other day we were discussing how we could be generating different the same API async API parser in different programming languages,
Hmm.
but we don't want to create an intermediate language or DSL or something like that because that would be like uh, too much, right? And we were discussing like, maybe a machine learning approach to this, like we train a machine learning model on how to translate from one programming language to another. Uh, this is something like I'm not totally sure this will work, but uh, but really it's something exciting to explore. And sorry, say again. I think I lost you.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea because in some ways it's sort of analogous to translating from natural language one to another. I mean, we're able to do that because there are large numbers of examples of a document written in one language and another. Um, so yeah, what would the equivalent be? It would be a fun project to try.
Now I got you curious with that. Great. We'll talk about it later. I'm sure. So Dale, so we're here today to discuss publish, subscribe, meaning, or perspective, or call it whatever you want, on async KPI. Like I said, this is highly confusing, and I have to confess that it is confusing for myself as well. And it's confusing me all the time. And people think like, this is Fran's vision. No, 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 really. I would prefer publish, subscribe, and async KPI to have a different meaning, but yeah, don't know which one, right? So so here we are, like we're discussing this on a GitHub issue that I'll share with the audience later, and also I would love to invite the audience here today to leave some questions in the chat or leave some comments if you have ideas. We're happy to discuss what you have to tell us on the chat, right? So my question for you is, what has been your feeling with regards to publish, subscribe when working with async KPI?
Um, so I definitely misunderstood the way the spec was meant to work. I mean, like you say, I've since realised that I'm in good company, so that's okay. I think partly why I misunderstood it was I came to async API trying to solve a different sort of problem than I think some of the other people in the GitHub issue are talking about. I think the main bit I missed was the goal being to describe an application, because that wasn't what I was setting out to do. So the goal I had was essentially being more channel oriented, trying to describe the sources of data, not the application. And it's because the sorts of customers I was working with and the kind of problems we were looking at were, if you think of microservices applications, there's a lot of the issue has been looking at, if you take that whole microservices application, how could you describe it in a spec and describe all the interactions between the microservices? That wasn't what I was trying to do. I was looking at, if you look at the application as a whole, as that sort of logical application boundary, and what are the APIs that are external to that? You know, what are the event sources that are going to be exposed for use outside of the microservices application? So I was looking at it as an outward external thing. So kind of the details of the application weren't what I was trying to capture. Essentially, if someone has got something producing message, so I've come at this from the Kafka side of things. I've been working in the Kafka space for many years now. So I tend to frame a lot of this in Kafka terms, but I think it sort of applies to other protocols as well. If a team has got something producing messages to a Kafka topic, they're going to make use of that themselves. They've got a reason why they're doing that, and they're using that, that's fine. But how do you enable reuse? How do you think, well, I've got this stream of events that is about, I don't know, whatever it is. And I'm making use of that, but I think that I've gone to the trouble of setting this up. There might be other developers in my organization that could make other uses of it. So I want them to know that this topic is there, that this stream of events is there. I want them to know how to get going with it, what data looks like. But I wouldn't consider them using it to be part of my application or to be interacting with my application. It's just, and partly I think because I'm coming at this from like an API management world, I'm used to the idea of publishing and socializing APIs to enable them to be reused. Not because they're part of my microservices application, but just that I consider that an external interface. That's on, I publish that externally, that's on the boundary, so that other teams can make use of it. So I saw subscribe in async API and thought that meant, well, that's what I want to publish, that people can subscribe to the events that I'm publishing. And I still think that's a use case. Listening to when you were talking, Lorna, last time around things like looking at actors, and I was trying to work out like how does that map to the problem I'm trying to solve of my external interfaces or my external reuse. Because I don't look at it in terms of actors, because I'm not trying to describe the application looking in. I'm trying to describe what it exposes looking out.
So I guess So I guess what you were looking for in first place was like, um, I think we discussed this in the past, like a menu of channels
Mm,
of where you can just publish or subscribe. You don't care if an application is publishing or subscribing. You just want to have like a list of, here are my list of topics. In the case of
mm.
Kafka, here are my list of topics, and of course you can publish to the topic and subscribe to the topic. Um, but you don't want that. You just want to know the existence of these topics, how to send messages, and what to expect when sending messages and receiving messages, and things like that. I guess like you were not looking at the application side, but more on the overall system description, right?
Yeah, cataloging it as a source of data. So, here is this stream of events that you might find useful in your application. I have no idea
Mhm.
how you might use it, what you might do with it. It's there if you want it. But sort of conceptually, I don't think of, like, if you write an application that starts doing something interesting with my stream of events from my topic, I don't consider your application to be interacting with mine. Like, I'm unaware of it. I'm not. It doesn't bother me. I'm making use of the messages on the topic for my own purposes, but I'm documenting it with async API to enable you to write an application, and not just you, but the 10 other yous that might write 10 other applications doing wonderful things I'd never even considered. It's that was the kind of thing I was trying to enable, that sort of discovery, innovation, that sort of enable wider reuse of these sources of events, the kind of things we've seen enabled in by API management over the last few years. Well, not few years, many years. And that was where I saw async API as being a nice way of crisply describing that to enable reuse. And stuff like the cogen accelerates that reuse. So it all sort of fit. But because I wasn't trying to describe my application, or at least I didn't think of myself as describing an application, that was why I went down this path of seeing subscribe as meaning consuming, because I wasn't describing and interacting with my app. I was describing a source of data. Um,
Yeah.
and like I said, it looks like several of us have had a similar confusion. So I can sort of see why I ended up there. But I still think that's a use case that we can address as we take the spec forward. And even with things like whether we call it actors or views or perspectives or any of that, I think that's fine. I can still sort of describe my problem and my use case in that way. It's just I have a more generic actor of anonymous consumer that I don't need to know about. I don't know there's some way of
Like a,
describing it.
yeah, like a default actor, maybe something
Yeah,
like that. Like you have like a default actor, you don't know who this actor is. It's like it's something that you're doing because the spec requires you to define an actor or something like that. In case we go that way, of course. Um, but I mean that problem that you're describing, it's not the first time I hear it. Like you mentioned a lot, enabling reuse of the channels of the definitions, right? And I think that has been another issue. So together, coupled to the publish subscribe issue, there is the other issue, which is I'm gonna show. I think it's better if I show my or so people can understand better what I'm talking about. Because in my mind it's perfect, but but I'm working all day with using KPI. So, but I think that's the case for everyone, right? So let me try. Yes. So this one. So I have this editor here already prepared for trying new stuff. So we have this problem here. Like we have, I don't know, channel, my channel, right? And we have maybe publish or subscribe, whatever. And we have the message, payload, and whatever. Say this is a string. Problem with this approach is that this is a list of channels, let's say, or a map of channels, and this is the operation publish subscribe, and this is again let's say, part of the channel, like what it's going to be inside the channel or flowing through the channel. If you see channels as pipes, I tend to imagine them as pipes, and this is the water flowing through the pipe, right? So this is the message is what it's going to be inside the pipe, inside the channel. So if we want to reuse this channel definition, the my channel definition, it is impossible because we have the tablets here, right? And uh, and the problem is that this is not part of the channel. This is what the application is doing with the channel,
Hmm.
right? It is enabling, in this case, is enabling publishing, so others can publish to this channel to communicate with myself. It is highly confusing to describe that.
Yeah.
People is always expecting that publish there means I am publishing to this channel this message, which is like, if you look at this, it's like what you will think it is doing, right? But it's not. It's the opposite actually. So
I mean,
so
because it's
yeah,
interesting because I haven't used the publish very much, or at least because I'm using async API to describe external interfaces. I haven't yet come across a use case where customers create a topic and want someone outside of their application, someone external to their team, to start putting messages on their topic. So we've only been using it for consuming, like essentially using async API to describe like a contract saying, I have this topic and this is what I'm going to be putting on it. And you can be sure that this is what the data on this topic will look like. So if you decide to consume it and make use of it, you know what to do with it. But like for what we've been doing, we don't allow other teams who discover the topic exists in through the async API spec and use that to work out how to start consuming. We don't allow them to publish to it because, and like I say, I've got a narrow use case, right? So although I've got a number of examples of where that's a problem, I'm not saying the spec shouldn't have a publish as part of its semantics, but just that
yeah,
for the problem I'm trying to solve, I don't want someone to interact with my app. I don't want someone to affect my app, and I don't want someone to put stuff on my topic. What I'm doing is describing what I'm doing with my topic, and you can use those messages if you want, but I'm not going to allow you to put a message on my topic.
yeah. So yeah, no, it makes total sense. So this is more like the approach. That's why you're never using publish here. Like you're
Mm,
always using subscribe. I mean, you could be using whatever
yeah,
because you're not really concerned about what others can do with the channel. You know that anybody can be publishing or subscribing to these topics. So yeah, you're not worried about the birth here. So and you're not the only one. So my proposal or my initial thinking about that was, and I think it was inspired by a comment from James Higginbotham. Like what if we take the birth out from the channel description? I think that's a must. That's why I was saying like, this problem is like very related to the publish subscribe problem. Like
mm,
channel reusability is like strictly coupled to the problem at hand here. And and I was thinking like, what if we have like a menu of channels, right? Something like this, and we have operations separated, right? So I was discussing this with Lorna the other day. Um, it led us to this actor description, but again, I would love to explore it again a little bit further. And what if we have something like operations, and we have, I don't know, publish to my channel, right? Something like this, and the operation type is going to be um, published, and the channel is going to be my channel, which is defined above, right, on the channels list. So by doing this, we'll have a list of things that this application is doing, right? This application here is doing.
mm.
But then I thought, like, what if none of this is actually required. Like you can have um, all of them are optional, right? So what if, I don't know, having a list of channels is optional? Maybe you can be referencing an external channel here, or you can have your channels here. But what if this? I'm just gonna comment it out. What if it could be like this, for instance? So then it will suit your use case perfectly, right? Like you just get a list of channels of topics with the messages described inside, and uh, and that will be like this kind of menu, right? Like, does it make sense? Like, is it
Yeah.
something that will fit your use case?
Yeah, and certainly, like I said, I looked at this as describing the data, describing. I've been looking at this from a channel-centric point of view. But that said, I do see on the GitHub thread, there's a lot of people who really see a lot of value in the application-centric approach. So I'm wary of throwing that out. But I think the problem when you go for an application-centric approach is which application are you describing? Like, are you describing what? So from my point of view, like I'm producing messages to a topic. Is the spec me describing what my application is doing, or is the spec describing what your application could do? Like it's a sort of semantic
It's
thing, but it frames a lot of how you look at it. Like where do you come from?
mm, it is exactly the confusion that we're having with publish and subscribe right now.
Yeah,
Like people think publish and subscribe means what your application is doing, but it actually is what it allows you to do, right?
yeah.
So it is,
And I do like
it's
that
like
way of looking at it, like permissions almost. Here's what you're allowed to do. Here's what
kind
you
of, yeah,
should be doing.
kind of, yeah. It's not. It is not. I mean, it is like permissions. Yes, I recall a friend of mine told me once, like you probably can explore this a little bit more, like permission side of things, let's say, uh, or permission approach. But it's not so much about permission. It's more about like if you publish to this channel, then I'll get this message, right? This I am the application. When I say I am the application, right? So I am this application, and if you publish a message to this channel, I'm gonna receive it, right? So if you want to communicate with me, you have to publish messages on this channel, right? That's the sort of definition that we have right now on the async API, and that fits well when you have like client server architectures like with HTTP or WebSockets, where you have a client and you have a server, and you can tell your client what they have to do, right? But I mean, it fits. Let's say maybe not well, but better. And when you have a broker-based architecture, this becomes a problem because it becomes not a problem, but it becomes confusing because it's like when I say if you want to communicate with me, you have to publish a message here. Who is you, right?
Yeah,
Who is you, and why should I be talking to someone? It's like no, I don't care. In event-driven architectures, usually one of the cool things is loose coupling.
yeah,
This loose coupling feature, right? So that you can create new publishers and subscribers, or whole applications that will publish and subscribe to different topics. There will be a mix, and you don't have to tell anyone, right? You just plug it and connect it to the broker, and it works. You don't have to modify any other service or any other microservice, or you don't have to modify anything, right? But
and I think async API is useful for that because, like I said, I see it as a contract, so that the person publishing is making a commitment to what they're going to publish, so that because if they just make arbitrary changes, they break all those other applications that they don't talk to those developers. They're not aware of them sort of closely, and if they start changing what the data is, all those loosely coupled apps fall over. So I think async API serves a useful role in that coupling because it's based on an agreement.
yeah, and I think this is like, I would say, one of the most important roles here, like because of this loose coupling, which is one of the, let's say, selling points of event driven, especially event driven microservices. Um, Even though this is one of the, like one of the biggest advantages, it's also one of the biggest problems, right? Because when it comes to management, to managing this communication, because unless you have that feature on the broker itself, how do you manage this communication, right? Like how do you know that if I am subscribing to this topic, I can expect this sort of message with this shape? And what happens if if I'm publishing a message to a topic, and I change the message and I do it in a, like uh, non backward compatible change?
Mm,
uh, who's gonna get affected when I do that? Like, who's gonna, because of this loose coupling precisely, it is hard to say, right? So who's managing that? Where, who has this solution, this answer for this question? And I think SNKP can play a big role there. Like, if the whole thing is described with SNKPI, then it will be just a matter of getting all the SNKPI files and drawing a map, drawing a
mm,
graph, like a graph of connections, and you could answer these questions. But if we go for the channel centric approach, and I think this is cool because that will enable reusability of channels. If we only go for channels and we forget about publish and subscribe for applications, or we forget about the role of the application here, then we lose that. We don't know.
yeah.
We lose that capability. So, like you said, it's also important to keep the
And
application
patterns
reference.
like sort of request reply, where there is an
Yeah,
actual one-to-one coupling, like there needs to be a way of describing those interactions. It's just that those aren't interactions that I'm currently working with.
exactly. So, by the way, I have we have Jess Menin from Solace, and thanks for saying that it's an awesome discussion. And I'm sorry it's 6 a.m. where you are. We have to do it at some point. And yeah. And also, he has a question for you. So there's a focus on file-based async KPIs, but they can live anywhere. For your product, do you see any async KPI channel listing as files or something else, like a registry?
So, so I'm biased. I mean, as you said, I work for IBM and I work on a product that is built around async API. So I don't want to plug it, but uh, I see a strong analogy between API management and events, even though traditionally events haven't really been managed in this with the same discipline that the APIs have. So a lot of what we've learned over the last decades of what an API manager means, we're trying to bring events to. So although I know you can just have a folder and store async APIs loose files, we're approaching it as they live in a catalog, they're organized, it's a searchable catalog, it's structured, it's published in a browsable catalog. So yeah, I'm approaching this from uh, as a they live in a database presented as a catalog, they're managed, and also we're looking at other things like how we do subscriptions, enable people to sign up to get access, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'm looking at async API as a way, as a format for storing things in a formal registry.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah, I agree. Like, I think storing things in files is like the most basic
Mm,
way of doing it when you're getting started. It's like this is the most basic way of doing things. But as these things get more mature, more and more mature, um, we'll start seeing. We already started seeing, especially with Solas and now IBM as well. That and I think WSO too as well. So we're seeing more and more people approaching this as a kind of a registry. So you have your async API definitions on a database, like you said, right? So effectively, this is stored in a database, and but it's a searchable registry, and it's a um, referenceable registry, so you can reference to a specific async API file on the registry. But
Yeah.
yeah, like I think that the part of that part of having the async API, not file, I was going to say async API file, the async API document in a file, it's like this is just like I will say implementation details on how you store it,
Mm.
right? But yeah, and I think it is cool to store it in files and put it on GitHub, for instance, so you can use GitHub as a kind of a registry, and and that also works for sure. But yeah, more and more we'll see services offering these catalogs of async API files, like
But I
we
think it
see
also
with
depends at
Kafka.
what point in the workflow you want to use it, because I think if you see it as a design time resource asset, then maybe like the flat file approach is okay. But I think partly because I've come from the Kafka world where we've had schema registries for quite a while, and schema registries serve not only a design time role but a runtime role, something that applications can dynamically get the description of the schema so that they can use that to dynamically deserialize and serialize data. Um, and I know that it's quite nice the way async API isn't trying to replace that, but lets you have a $ref pointing at a schema registry. So you can still get that runtime element and have async API for the design time element, and they complement each other. But I still think there's more we could do with async API to better enable that runtime aspect. Because I think at the moment it's still, for me at least, I've focused a lot on the design time aspect.
It is. It is. I mean, initially that the purpose of async API was to generate code and documentation. So I think it's all design time. It all happens offline. So I think it's all. That's why we're seeing these use cases, like uh, it's 4 years now. I think, yeah, more or less. It's 4 years after I created async API. We're now seeing runtime use cases, right?
Mm.
Because we're not seeing it since the beginning, because yeah, the very beginning it was for design time, right? So that's your thumbs up from Gis. Thanks. Yes. And yeah, so coming back to the publish subscribe thing.
Mm.
Um so I was saying, let me just I need to get used to this software. Oh, nice. I love it. so so yeah, I was saying like this approach, like we decouple these things here. So for instance, a document can be just this, and this will serve that purpose of acting as a registry of channels, as a menu of channels, right? Then at some point, what can happen is that I don't know, just let's do the opposite. So I want to document my application, right? And then I could be doing something like my list of channels is my registry.com, my channels, okay, something like this, and that will be or JSON or whatever, right? So you can put your channels somewhere, which could be effectively could be a single file, or a single file, a single document, can be in a database, can be on a on a file, um, can be a single file, and then from here we have uh, from the application definition we can have this, like here are my channels, and now they are described somewhere else, and here are my um, operations. So this is what I'm gonna be doing, right? So I'm gonna be publishing to my channel, which is not visible here, but it's described here on this URL, and I'm gonna be publishing. This is my channel. Okay. Still, so for Kafka, for brokers, this is cool. This is like very, I would say, intuitive of what's happening. I'm just gonna do this so we can still see. But what happens is that let's say that we have a um, client server API like WebSockets. We have WebSockets. You have your WebSocket server, and you have WebSocket clients. So effectively, this is like a REST API, like an HTTP API. There's no broker, or if you want, the server, the WebSocket server is the broker, it's the application, and the broker is the two things at once in a single piece. So if we do this, then say um, this is my WebSocket API, so or WebSocket server, okay? And what does it mean? Like, what does publish to my channel mean? Does it mean that the client can publish to my channel, or is it that the server is sending messages to the client on the my channel topic? I mean, WebSockets like
Yeah.
socket.io has this concept of rooms or namespaces as well, so it could be emulated. So what does it mean? So in the case of WebSockets, or in the case of client server, it seems like it seems to be the opposite as with brokers. It's like, no, I'm expecting. I want to define what my clients can do with me. It's like how they can communicate with me. Like, you can publish, or you can subscribe to my messages here. Uh, and that's exactly what is making these things highly confusing,
Mm.
right? It's like, if we change the meaning of publish and subscribe, and we make it mean what my application is doing, and instead of what my application is expecting, then the case of client server doesn't work anymore. Like, it's broken, like, then these other cases will become confusing. Right? So
Yeah.
it's like, you have this situation where it's like, damn, there's no win here. And it's like, whatever we do, someone is gonna be losing. It's always, it's like we have like two halves. We can be arguing forever which half is bigger than the other. Like, no, brokers are bigger than the client server WebSocket use cases. I don't mind, but even if WebSocket use cases are not as big as the broker use cases, they're still big. So there are many people doing WebSockets, GraphQL subscriptions, HTTP to server sent events, which is still event-driven architectures, but with a different topology, right? It's not
Mm.
There's no broker, it's client server. So we cannot just say we leave them out and we don't care, right?
Yeah.
It's like this is for only for brokers. So that's why Lorna came up with this solution of the actors, right? Um, as a way to describe things, let's say, differently. In the case of the actors, one of the things that we were assuming is that publish and subscribe is always from the point of view of what the application is doing, not what the application is expecting.
Mm.
And so when I asked Lorna, like, if we have a WebSocket server and we want to tell the WebSocket client what they can do, this is confusing. So what what she suggested is, then you need to have another file, another document, right, for your WebSocket client, and you give this to your WebSocket clients, right, and then you put the operations here for your WebSocket client.
Mm.
But I partly understand her point of view. Um, I still think it will be great to explore not having to define what the client has to do, because my feeling here is
Yeah.
that, and this might be a little bit purist, if you want, from the point of view, is that this is not describing the API. This is describing behavior, right? This is like, I'm coding. I'm effectively coding here. I'm saying, like, publish to my channel, right? I want to publish. I'm telling the application what to do, and instead of defining the interface, I'm not defining the interface. I'm defining a behavior, right? So we will not be talking about APIs anymore. We will be talking about behavior definition, right? It's like publish, subscribe. You have to do this or that. You know, it's not as opposed to I am expecting that you do this or that. If you want to communicate with me, this is my interface, right?
mm,
Um, I used to put this example with audio jacks. You know, it's like the audio jack is like you always have like the in and out on the audio jack,
yeah,
and you don't care what is inside the box. You just have the interface, right?
yeah,
And nobody should be caring of what is inside the box, and the box should not be caring of which electronic device are you plugging in, right? It's like, no, this is my interface. If you want to communicate with me, here's how you should do it, right? Here's the interface, right?
yeah,
Um, but again, this example is one, right? So it
yeah,
maps well with client server. When it comes to then, if we keep if we keep doing it like this, then the broker example suffers, which is where we are right now, right? This is the point where we are right now. So
mm.
um, now I'm gonna ask you the big question: like, how do you think we could be solving this? Any ideas?
I don't know, because I am, like I said, I'm biased. You know, I've got one very niche, not niche, but one particular subset problem that I'm looking to solve. So I'm kind of biased by that. Um, like if I was to ignore everyone else, I would go with a channel centric approach, describing the data, and because I see it as an external interface, um, similar to, like you say, you know, your audio device idea. You know, I don't want to describe my application. My application is mine. It's nothing to do with you. What I'm describing is the data that I'm emitting, that I'm allowing you to access. So I would go the channel centric approach, but I do think that would be losing a lot of things, a lot of value that the rest of the community is getting. So how do you square both? I don't, I can certainly see how I could do something that would be compatible with the actor's sort of approach. So although I don't see myself exploiting that a lot, I don't think it would be a problem. I'm trying to think how it would play out. Yeah, I do like the idea of having, I think you're right that reusing the message definitions, reusing the channel definitions does allow you to have different views. So you could have a document that describes one actor's perspective and another. So you could have your one document that describes your internal view that you might use to code generate your application, and then a different document that you give to third parties or other developers or people outside your team who are allowed to consume the data, that and their document describes a different perspective, the, you know, the external interface only, that contract, for loose coupling. I mean, we instinctively, I don't want to maintain two documents for one thing, but certainly when it comes to, because it's not just about the semantic bits, but it's all about because where I see so much value in people's use of async API is in that free text stuff, the description and the summary and the title, because it's that narrative that helps a developer know where to start. It's that kind of setting the scene, like the fact that it's markdown, they can put images in there, they can put rich formatting in there. That's really, really valuable. And I think if you try and have everything in one spec for both sides, it's really hard, because are you writing a description of your app or their app? So I think having separating it at least allows you to write a relevant, coherent narrative in those fields, even if you reuse the actual specifics of the message schemas.
So now, hmm. Yeah, that was. I like that you mentioned this part. Like human readable fields, like description and summaries, um, because there tends to be a problem when. Um, so, for instance, one of the things that happens if we want to describe, let's say this is WebSocket server, and we are describing no matter what. Let's say this is published to my channel, and it means that the WebSocket server is expecting that the client can publish to my channel. Let's frame it like this. So the description here will be something like um, messages sent to my channel, or um, yeah, let's not mention server or client, but let's say like this is yeah, let's say that this is messages sent to my channel, and published to my channel actually means that the WebSocket server is publishing to my channel. So if we do it like this, then this description means that. But if by using this definition we want to generate a client, for instance, we want to use this definition, we know it's a one-on-one relationship, so it's like cool. So by reusing this definition, we can generate the client. Then if you generate the client, what does it mean? Like with this description here, what does it mean? Like it doesn't make sense.
Mm,
It's that it will be, um, or say like let's say that messages the server sends my channel, right? So uh, if we generate the client, then it's like uh, why is it on my channel on the client side? Why is it defining what the server is doing? It will be saying something like messages the client can consume from my channel, right? Right.
mm,
So you know what I mean. So
yeah.
descriptions can also get confusing, like, and I think, and that's not this one is not easy to solve, because I mean we will have to be using natural language processing, right? To change that, but not gonna go that way for sure. So so what happens is that, yeah, it becomes effectively impossible, right? But now that I'm thinking about it, like OpenAPI has the same problem. Like when you're describing a REST API and you have get, put, post, whatever, and you're describing these operations, and you have a description there, right? If you put a description there and you're describing what the client can do, you can send a get request um, to the server. Then if you have this documentation, this description on the server side, it doesn't make sense. It's like I'm defining the server side. Why are you talking to me about what the client can do, right?
Mm,
So another thing that and I don't want to forget about it. So there's something that Lucas was mentioning. It's like something like Operation ID. This is meant uh, for the programming languages, right? So if I have something here, like say this is WebSocket server and subscribe to my channel, yeah, publish to my channel. Let's leave it like that. And if I have, I don't know, let's put it a little bit easier to follow. This user signed up, and let's say on user signed up. Let's frame it that way. This is the operation ID. Okay. If we put it that way, and we use on signed up for code generation on the server side, this might make sense. But if we're gonna generate client side of things, we cannot use the word on user signed up because it's doing the opposite. It's not an event; it's actually publishing, right? So you know what I mean. So it gets even these fields get highly confusing. These little details can get highly confusing. So,
Mm.
so the answer from Lorna was you cannot you cannot generate a client from the server description. Not even in OpenAPI. People are doing it, but you cannot accurately generate a client from the server description, and that's why it's getting confusing, right?
So does that mean you end up needing different specs for different uh, actors roles?
Yeah. Or maybe a single document where you describe all the roles.
Yeah.
Where you describe this is the role or the actor, or let's some people are calling it actor, some people role.
Yeah.
So this is the role of my server, and my server is doing an operation which is on user signed up, but I have another role which is send user signed up, right? And uh, yeah, and let's say this is subscribe. Okay, so my server is going to subscribe, and whenever it receives the message, it's going to trigger this function. And whenever and the client is publishing this message, and to publish this message, it's going to call this function to send it. This is in the case of code generation, of course. That could work, right? And then you have to put something like role client, and here you put role server, right? Or I want to make it clear these are not. You can put whatever you want here, right? So my client, my server. Whatever. So, but then if you do that, what's this title? WebSocket server. Why are we defining things about the client on this WebSocket server file? Right?
Yeah.
So is it like, so we be getting rid of this info piece here, and or should it be defining something else, not the application, but the API, the interface? Maybe, I don't know.
The problem is it depends what it is you want to document. Are you documenting your own application because internal documentation is useful and valuable, or are you documenting what other applications are able to do to enable them to create their applications? And the problem is both are valuable things to do. So we kind of instinctively want the spec to be able to support both, but they are two different jobs, and it's trying to satisfy both things is a challenge. And I don't think we should just pick and do one, but I think we do need to acknowledge that they are different objectives. And if we try and do both at the same time, we'll end up doing both badly.
Yeah, that's a risk. Exactly, that's a risk that we if we focus on doing everything, maybe we'll never do anything well. So um, I had this other idea, which is like operations are um, what the application is doing, and then you have another section here, which is the API and the interface, right? I know it sounds weird because isn't KPI is supposed to be about APIs, right? It's in the name, right? Uh,
Hmm.
so why are you needing another section called API, right? But let's just forget about that, about the name, and let's just put a section here, and let's say so here on operations, what you have is what your server is going to do, So publish and subscribe means that your server is going to publish or is going to subscribe.
Mm.
And on API, we do define or we do define the interface. Let's say, so for instance, hmm, no, I think it's they are mutually exclusive. So it is something like there is an API which is um, user signed up, and you can use it. So you are providing the ability for others to subscribe or to publish. Sorry, and on the channel, my channel, or on the channel user sign up. I don't know if I call it like this, but
Yeah, I like the idea of that.
so
So you start by at a high level describing this is my application, this is what it's doing, but then separately you explicitly call out, and here's the things that your application is allowed to do. So you're allowed to. I'm coming back to permissions again, which is probably not the right way of framing it, but that idea of explicitly calling out your interfaces and your expectations of other apps.
oops, I just I just realized that I wasn't sharing my screen.
But
So
coming back
okay,
to what we were saying about loosely coupled apps, that explicitly calling out your interface, your expectations, I think that's a really positive thing to do because that does set an expectation that allows people to build things on.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I like the meaning of publish and subscribe right now. What they offer.
Hmm.
What I don't like is that they are highly confusing. So I was like, is there another way to do this,
Hmm.
have the same meaning, but still, but be less confusing? I don't think it's possible because because it is. I mean, and this time I'm thinking about broker, like broker architecture. Um, so when you are in a broker architecture, having this that you have here, this API section, it is like mostly non. It is. It's not something that you will probably do. It's like why? I just want to define if I'm publishing or subscribing, right? I will probably use this section here. I just want to tell I just want to tell here that I am sending messages to the broker or I'm subscribing to the topic to receive messages from the broker, right? I don't care what others can do with me. It's like it is not the case. But so people will so broker centric, let's say architectures will be using that part, the operations, and yeah, that's just so we will not need that role thing here. So it's just user signed up and yeah, so because I'm defining this, um, I am receiving the message. I'm subscribing to my channel to receive this kind of message, and this is my operation ID. In the code that you want to generate, you can use this for. And there's no client side because
Yeah.
because I am a client myself. Like when you are defining this, you're defining the client because when you're connecting to a broker, you are a client. You're not a server, right? Um, um, so yeah, so there's no client side thing. But here, when you're doing something like exposing this something to the public, or uh, not necessarily to the public, but when you want others to consume your API, right, your server,
Yep.
then you will probably have this, which is similar to what we have right now,
Hmm.
and that will mean that people can communicate with you by publishing a message on the user signed up channel, right? And it is separated. It is another section
Hmm.
on purpose to make the distinction. Like It's like we can do it with async API, but it doesn't have to be necessarily inside operations, right?
Yeah.
Because
And then they can both have their own descriptions. So where there's nuances that affect external actors, internal implementation, you can describe both separately in their own way. Yeah, I like that.
exactly. And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, like, so imagine that we have servers, and I have a WebSocket server, whatever, and I have a Kafka broker, whatever, there. My application might be receiving something on the server WebSockets, right? So a WebSocket client can publish to me on this uh, on this channel, right? So this is the API, and as a result, it's not encoded here. The workflow is not encoded here, but as a result, I will be publishing, I don't know, a message on my channel too. So um, right, so I will be, and the server will be Kafka, right? So this is effectively like composing an application. So imagine that you have an application that is listening to WebSocket clients, would be a UI, for instance, your browser UI, and it means that user signed up means that the user actually hit the, the user sign up the sign up button, right, and fill the whole form and everything. So there's a new message that goes to the server. I will do this with HTTP, but yeah, let's assume that this is WebSocket, and and then you send this message to the server, and as a result, this same application, the WebSocket server, will send a message to Kafka,
Hmm.
right? So this could be encoded here in a single document without the link of, just because you do this operation, then this other one is going to happen. But both operations can be defined there, right? And in a separate way. So operations in API, yeah, they're not mutually exclusive, as I was thinking. So you can probably have both. Thoughts?
Yeah, I like that. Um, I think making it clear what you're describing in each section does give people like me that only have one side that they're particularly interested in, gives a clear place of just describing that. And for scenarios where you want to describe both, you can reuse the definition so you're not duplicating the spec. Yeah, that seems like, I like that.
Awesome. So as I mean, I'm enjoying a lot, but we're approaching. I mean, we're already past 1 hour, so and it's lunchtime for
This
both
is
of us. So and but before we finish, I would love to ask you a question, or a question. I would like to ask you a favor, and as you don't know the next guest, and so I would love if you could ask a question to the next guest, even if you don't know who they are. So yeah.
um, well, I touched really briefly earlier on the distinction between design time versus runtime, and how, and I'd love to hear what more people think about that. Like, do they see use cases for async API in a runtime sort of way? And if so, what, like, because code thinks of async API as a design time step, but we're not really doing much with the more dynamic runtime elements of it. And I'm interested to know what is anyone else interested in taking async API more into that space?
So this is the question for the.
Yeah,
for the
just
next guest.
yeah. Are you interested in using it in a runtime way? Do you think the spec would support it? Like, what could we add to the spec to make that easier?
Okay, sounds good. Cool. Perfect. So we get that. Um, Thanks a lot for joining me today.
Until
And
thanks for inviting me.
it's
It
been a
was really
pleasure.
interesting.
It's been a pleasure, man. So happy to chat again. We chat often on the um, bi-weekly meetings of
Yeah,
Async KPI, which I encourage the audience to join if you're not aware of them. Just go to asynckpi.com or .org and you'll find everything in there. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining as well on the chat. Thanks Jess for the questions. Thanks Stuart for your great words. And yeah, see you in the next episode.
thanks a lot.
Bye bye.